Hello, and welcome to the Ocean News Podcast, an audio series taking you through the breaking news and the biggest stories from the Oceanographic newsroom. I'm Rob Hutchins, news editor here at Oceanographic magazine, and in this episode, I'll be leading us on a deeper dive into just one story from today's leading headlines. And today, we're talking sea snails. Now this is a fascinating tale of a study spanning 2 decades, conducted by not just the same university, but by the very same scientist himself, who has gone to document the rapid response defense mechanism evolution in real time displayed by 2 species of common sea snail in North America, and the impact it could have on their future generations. So for this story, we head to the Gulf of Maine, where we will arrive by ship ballast water alongside a whole host of other invasive species for which this particular region of the North American coastline has become rather notorious. Over the last 2 decades, the Gulf of Maine has become a hotspot for invasive predators. Most successful among them is the green crab, contributing to what scientists have described as a confluence of significant environmental change within the region and its waters. Noting just how severely this area has since undergone environmental and ecosystem change, researchers from Northeastern University's Marine Science Center wanted to study how local life had been adapting, and their subject of choice, of course, being sea snails. And it turns out that sea snails have displayed quite the response, an expedited evolution over the course of 20 years that has seen them evolve thicker shells to better defend themselves from surging green crab numbers. It would have been the perfect display of natural generational adaptation to a crisis, were it not also a response mechanism that came with one very large drawback. These sea snails' enhanced shell defenses may be their biggest hindrance when it comes to reproducing. This is a study filled with intrigue, so let's start at its beginning, back in the late 1990s. It was 1998 when Jeffrey Trussell set out on his PhD investigation into sea snail populations local to the Gulf of Maine. 1998 was a pivotal year for surging numbers of green crabs marching their way northwards from the mid-Atlantic to this particular spot. And it's here these green crab developed a particular taste for common tidal snails. Trussell wanted to get a measure of how nature might respond to this invasion, so he got to work recording the response mechanisms of 2 species of common sea snail, the Nucella lepillus and the Littorina obtusata. His first study took place in 1998 when the green crabs had first started to arrive on the Gulf of Maine. His second study took place 20 years later, in 2018. Over that time, Trussell observed that the snails were growing shells significantly more rigid in defense, which would have been all well and good, were it not for the fact that what these sea snails gained in the thickness of their shells, they lost in their levels of adaptive plasticity. Plasticity is the ability to produce within a generation a change in a trait that enhances your ability to survive. In the 1990s, snails in the Gulf of Maine possessed more of this short-term adaptability. It's almost an on-demand defense mechanism, triggered by a cue that a species is at risk of a predator. It's a system that allows a sea snail, for example, to grow a shell of increased thickness within a period of heightened predatory risk, but maintain the body mass necessary to perform other crucial tasks such as shed that shell and grow a new one, or find a mate and reproduce. 2 decades on, however, and the study indicates that genetic evolution has overshadowed that plasticity, suggesting that constant pressure from predatory species, such as the green crab, have steered snails towards more fixed physical traits, like a thick shell. And that is an issue for snails. It's an issue because a lot of the daily tasks performed by sea snails is dependent on their body mass. A sea snail benefiting from increased fortification, thus protection, provided by a thicker shell, will have a decreased body mass. In his paper, Trussell writes that back in the early days, if a snail had a thick shell, they had very little soft body mass. If they had a thin shell, however, they had a lot of body mass. In addition to the shells being thicker, he continues, sea snail body mass is plummeting. And that body mass has a direct effect on things like how many offspring they're able to produce. So a decreased behavioral plasticity has huge consequences, not only for how these snail communities are now structured, but also for how their ecosystem functions. What this all means for sea snails on the Gulf of Maine is for now uncertain. Sea snails are, of course, a vital component of the marine ecosystem, serving as both a food source for native predators and playing a crucial role in nutrient cycling and algae control. Surging populations of non-native green crabs are just one of the issues the species faces right now, haunted by the usual spectre of climate change and global ocean temperatures rising, alongside other issues including ocean acidification. Meanwhile, those green crabs continue to be a menace to the waters of the Gulf of Maine, with numbers in the region having exploded in recent years, coinciding with those warming ocean temperatures. In fact, that warming ocean doesn't look to be slowing down either, certainly not in Maine, where the waters are currently warming faster than 99% of the world's ocean. A drop in ocean temperatures could stave off the advance of the European green crab, but such a thing isn't anticipated anytime soon, meaning more likely is it that the invasive green crab population will continue to rise alongside those ocean temperatures. For the local populations of sea snail, it's a reasonable assumption to make that things could be getting worse before they get better. Dr. Trussell plans to return to his study in 2028 to complete 3 decades of research into the adaptive behaviour of Maine's native sea snails. Hope rests therefore on a reversal of fortune, or the sea snail could just become emblematic of the scale of the crisis the fragile marine ecosystem faces this decade. If you'd like to learn more about this story or other stories on the adaptation and response of life in the ocean, head to the Oceanographic Newsroom. This has been the Ocean News Podcast. I've been Rob Hutchins. Thank you for listening.